Attentive listening is an underrated superpower in the art of communication. In a world of noise and constant talking, the ability to quietly extract the deeper meaning from people's words is an invaluable skill. So let's examine an example from the Joe Rogan Experience, where Tucker Carlson discusses conspiracy theories and UFOs. Now, the actual part of this conversation lasted over 10 minutes, so I'll be fast forwarding through a few parts in order to focus on effective listening techniques.
And then someone from, a DOD employee reached out to me and said, actually, there's a ton of evidence that this UFO thing is real. And really? And so I started doing segments on it when I worked at the TV channel. And there was a lot of mockery, but I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to do this. And then, of course, the second you start, as you know better than anybody, you start talking about something, then people reach out to you, and some of them are deranged, but some of them aren't at all. So I just started getting a lot of information from people and meeting with people, mostly in private, come to my house, let's talk. And I decided on the basis of what they told me, and then I talked to a lot of people about it, that actually this is really a very heavy duty question. Actually, it's not the little green men question. It's like a much bigger question. And it's really bad. It's really dark. And then I stopped. Then I was like, I don't want to know anymore because it's not helping me at all as a person. And
what information did you get that made you feel like it's dark?
The words bad and dark are very general words that we use in various ways and in all kinds of situations. In other words, they're ambiguous words that are open to interpretation. Part of listening attentively is identifying the words and statements that can be interpreted in many ways and asking people to elaborate on them. This will instantly improve your conversations because it'll help you and the person who's speaking understand what it is they really mean to say when they make these vague statements. It also gives you more information to explore, which naturally keeps the conversation going.
At all as a person. And
what information did you get that made you feel like it's dark?
What's so dark? Well, first of all, the deception is always bad. Like lying is bad and it's bad not just in a legal sense in that it can be illegal to lie, but it's bad. It's like bad for you. Like it rots you. Like being a liar makes you a bad person. When you lie, you are serving evil. There's a moral quality to it that's inescapable and very obvious, and only like advanced civilizations ignore that. Lying is bad. And so if you have lying at scale, which we have on this topic, it's inherently bad. Okay, so that's the first level. The deeper level is so if they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, like it's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but like, what are these things? Are they good or bad? And I think some of them are bad. And if the U.S. government knows that, or the people within the U.S. government know that, then they're serving a bad force. And
well, when you say spiritual, like what makes you draw that conclusion that they're spiritual?
What's the obvious? I mean, spiritual may be the wrong word. Supernatural. They're beyond nature as we understand it.
Again, what I want you to understand is the simple yet powerful practice of attentively listening to identify the ambiguous things people say and simply asking them what it is they are really trying to communicate, as opposed to taking things at face value and assuming that everyone thinks and uses words the same way you do. Because there's often a lot of hidden and more interesting information that never gets revealed, simply because people don't ask for it. And you can do this even when you agree with what someone has said. For example, if your friend says, Gareth Southgate is a terrible manager and doesn't deserve to be the leader of the England national team, instead of immediately saying something like, absolutely, they need to fire that guy, you could simply say, what makes him so terrible? Why don't you think he's qualified to be the manager? This will naturally lengthen the conversation, and you might find more interesting things to talk about in their response. Because you most likely already know what you think, so why not spend some time considering what someone else thinks?
Well, when you say spiritual, like what makes you draw that conclusion that they're spiritual?
What's the obvious? I mean, spiritual may be the wrong word. Supernatural. They're beyond nature as we understand it. I mean, obviously they are. I mean, just chart their physical behavior. It doesn't, it goes outside of what we understand about physics. no visible means of propulsion, coming at indescribable speed, hitting the ocean, continuing at speeds that are impossible undersea. I mean, in other words, if I take a 9mm round or 7.62 by 39 and shoot you at 50 yards underwater in a swimming pool, and it's even more intense in salt water because it's denser, you could catch the bullet if it even makes it to you, right? So if you have a craft, any object underwater that's traveling at 500 knots as measured by sonar, right there you're challenging our understanding of physics. Like, what is that? How can that be? So yeah,
they've tracked that. They've tracked things going 500 knots under the sea.
Yeah, really. Yeah, much faster than any object can actually go undersea. For sure.
Next, let's discuss another good practice known as fact-checking. When people cite statistics or make claims, it's valuable to ask for their sources. And this isn't about confrontation or proving someone wrong, but instead about curiosity or the desire to learn and understand more. Instead of dismissing their claims, simply ask, "How do you know that?" Or, "Where did you get that information?" This approach, as Joe demonstrates, often leads to more in-depth discussions and reveals the depth of someone's knowledge on a topic.
So if you have a craft, any object underwater that's traveling at 500 knots as measured by sonar, right there you're challenging our understanding of physics. Like, what is that? How can that be? So yeah,
they've tracked that. They've tracked things going 500 knots under the sea.
Yeah, really. Yeah, much faster than any object can actually go undersea. For sure. Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on underwater, and a lot. And there's video of these things coming out of the sky into the water and also emerging from the water.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's all so blurry though.
I don't think it's
the
that
transmedium video.
Yeah, I don't think some of it's that blurry. I think some of it's crystal clear.
We just don't have access to it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Just we haven't seen it.
Correct.
So they have some stuff
for sure. So, but there's just a lot going on underwater, and it's measured, and so whatever. And people have been hurt by these things. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's a knowable fact. It's a provable fact. And killed. And I'm not saying millions of people have been killed by whatever these things are, but people have been killed, and it's known because it's working its way through the courts out of the VA. So, I don't know, an object that is by definition supernatural, it's above the laws of nature as we understand them, and that has resulted in the deaths of people. We don't spend enough time thinking about what that adds up to. Not good, actually, not good.
How many people do you think have died from these things?
I don't know, but I mean,
And is it radiation sickness? Is it what's the
so
cause
the person
of death?
that I talked to, I interviewed someone who was a Stanford medical school professor who's out there and worth talking to, by the way. And
you talking about Gary Nolan?
That's exactly who I'm talking about. He was effectively an expert witness in these cases, so he's an expert in brain injury. Do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah. His conclusion, as you know because you've talked to him, is that there's some kind of energy coming off here that scrambles people's brains or kills them. And it's not exactly radiation, at least in his telling to me. So anyway, but the point is, people have died.
As you can see, Joe continues to fact-check Tucker's claims. Tucker says that there's proof of people being killed by whoever or whatever is flying these UFOs, but doesn't say how many people have been killed or what the cause of death was. So Joe, just being curious, asked Tucker to be specific. And in the end, he couldn't do it because he admittedly doesn't know any of these specifics, and then ends by returning to his original point.
There's some kind of energy coming off here that scrambles people's brains or kills them. And it's not exactly radiation, at least in his telling to me. So anyway, but the point is, people have died.
Now, I repeat, I'm not taking any shots at Tucker Carlson. I'm sure he knows much more than I do about this UFO stuff, and I'm not here to dispute that. This clip is simply a good example of how fact-checking someone can deepen a conversation and show you whether or not someone really knows what they're talking about, as well as how they know. Some people tend to rely on hyperbole, or exaggerated statements, which by definition are not meant to be taken seriously. And if you're not listening attentively, You might make the mistake of taking everyone's words literally and therefore misunderstand what they really mean. And others rely on unverified statistics to prove their points, which can lead you to assume that they know much more than they actually do. And pressing them non-confrontationally is an easy way to reveal that.
So anyway, but the point is, people have died.
Yeah.
And so, it does raise a lot of questions about, like, what the hell, right? What the hell? American citizens have died and you're hiding it? Why are you hiding that? Why would you hide that?
Perhaps because they don't have any explanations. Because it's so beyond our comprehension that they're still trying to piece it together. Like, I would wonder how much interaction they really do have with these things. Like, if I was from another planet or if I was some interdimensional being, I don't know how much I'd give a shit about the president.
The final tip is to reciprocate effort or end the conversation. Attentive listening involves not just understanding what people say, but also contributing your own thoughts. So don't just respond with things like, yeah, cool, because this just kills the momentum of the conversation. If you're not prepared to actively participate, it's better to politely conclude the conversation rather than giving a false impression of engagement. In the clip you just saw, Tucker finishes his idea with a rhetorical question, and Joe keeps the conversation going by playing the devil's advocate and coming up with a possible answer to Tucker's question. So watch what happens next.
Like, if I was from another planet or if I was some interdimensional being, I don't know how much I'd give a shit about the president. I don't know how much I'd give a shit about the government. I would probably look at this infantile race, this species, this bizarre territorial apes with thermonuclear weapons, this very weird species. I'd probably look at them as very chaotic, and I wouldn't really have much concern for who's running it, especially if they have the ability to travel at insane speeds and go undetected. And
well, it depends. Like that. Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is like science fiction, right? These are an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that every other society before us has used is a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world that's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours. In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945, when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And all of a sudden, the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us. And that's the world that we have grown up in. But that's an anomaly. Like, no one else has ever thought that. There's never been a society that thought that. Every other society has assumed, and they've had all kinds of different explanations, and the details differ. But the core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times. And so to someone born before or living before 1945, I think it would have been much more obvious that this is the thing that every society has written about. And in fact, that battle, that unseen battle around us, that spiritual battle, has like been the basis of every society, of every religion, not just Christianity. So like it just, once you discard your very, very recent assumptions, relatively speaking, about how the world works, you're like, well, that kind of seems like the obvious explanation, right?
It's not that obvious to me.
So what's more obvious, do you think?
Well, I don't think there's an obvious explanation.
In this exchange, Joe listens attentively and contributes his own ideas, prompting Tucker to elaborate. When Tucker claims his view is obvious, Joe disagrees, leading Tucker to ask, "What's more obvious to you?" And this mutual effort to listen and contribute creates a balanced, flowing conversation where both parties are engaged and interested in each other's perspectives. So if you can develop the habit of asking people to elaborate on ambiguous statements, fact-checking their claims politely, and reciprocating the effort to contribute thoughts and ideas, I guarantee you'll start having longer and more enjoyable conversations.